People get sick around this time of year. It's something that happens. It's seasonal. We get flu season and all of that. And when we start talking about that, we start talking about immunizations and vaccinations and things of that nature. And they have been in the news lately. And there are people who have been seeking waivers who don't want vaccinations for their children. And these waivers are now subject to new rules and are going to be more difficult to obtain. So I wanted to get on as our guest this morning, Dr. Richard Van Enck, who is the Director of Infection Prevention and Epidemiology at Bronson Methodist Hospital. And so, Dr. Van Enck, good morning and welcome to 590 WKZO and the Wayne Powers Show.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Very good.
Have you been vaccinated?
I have. Yes, I have. I'm all up to date, Wayne.
All right. I always like to make sure my guests have all their shots before we start talking to them.
Good. Just like the pets in the veterinarian. Yes,
That's exactly right. All right. Well, talk to us now. Seriously, it is a serious subject, and we're talking about folks' health and the risks of infection spreading throughout the community. So, talk to us about. Let's talk first about what vaccinations are, how they work, okay, so that we understand what it is we're even talking about.
Sure. Well, when you have an infectious disease, it's caused by a microorganism. And those microorganisms get into the body and they do some damage, some pathology. The body eventually produces an immune response to those microorganisms, those germs, and normally fights them off. But it takes some time, and sometimes it's too late. Sometimes patients die of these infections, and the body's defenses aren't strong enough to fight them off the first encounter. But the body is designed in a very amazing way in that the second time we encounter an infectious disease, the body learns to respond to it. And it's called immunologic memory. So our immune response, our immune system recognizes it the second time because it's learned about that particular disease, and it responds much faster and much higher and much, much stronger the second time. So if you're immune to an infectious disease, you're much more likely to fight it off and not get sick, and you might not have any symptoms at all. Instead of getting sick, you might never realize that you were exposed to this disease. So that's what the vaccine does. It tries to get the initial encounter or the primary exposure over with in a safe way using a safe drug that we call a vaccine, so that the second time your body sees that infection, it's prepared and it can defend you much better against that disease.
It's pretty amazing stuff. I mean, it's almost like the body has a memory, as you say, and it's like the first time we encounter an infection, the body's got to figure out, first of all, we're being attacked. It's an infection. What is this? How does it work? What is it attacking? And it figures out a response, before it can respond in full force. And what you're saying is a vaccine allows you to do that in a controlled way, without risking, getting the symptoms in full force. So are we talking about, we're actually infecting you with a disease, but in a very small dosage, so that it's not enough to get the disease full force, but enough to just alert the immune system?
It's not usually a matter of dosage. It's a matter of the formulation or the type. Most vaccines are parts of the microorganism that will produce that response, but they won't grow or they won't produce the disease.
So what we're doing is we're injecting the trigger mechanism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
That's absolutely amazing technology. Now, there are a lot of folks who don't trust this entire process or choose not to partake of it for their children, and they have sought waivers based on their either their religious beliefs or their own preferences. Now, let's talk about what's wrong with that. Is there a problem with that?
Well, it could be. It could not. I mean, there's a number of problems with that, both on an individual level for the individual person and on a population level. And I think that all of those types of things are ethical decisions, and they're worthy of discussion from the point of view of the appropriateness of that decision. So on the part of the individual, if somebody is not immunized against an infectious disease that they could be immunized against, then there's some risk there. And so that person who is not immunized is incurring some risk that's avoidable. So there's potential harm that you're putting the non-immunized person in the way of, and that might not be a good idea. The other thing about infectious diseases is that they affect the population. Unlike any other disease or any other type of drug, when one person has it, it affects other people. If you have diabetes, for instance, and you don't take your insulin, that doesn't affect me. If you have high blood pressure and you don't take your blood pressure medicine, that doesn't affect me. But if you don't get an immunization, that affects me. That puts me at risk because you could transmit that infection to me. So infectious diseases and vaccines are unique in medicine, and that they have an application to the population. They affect other people, and sometimes I think these individuals that are objecting to vaccines don't necessarily realize the implications of their decision on other people.
Well, and also a lot of them are doing it on behalf of their children, and children are not allowed to make their own decisions about these, so we're responsible for our children. It's a very important decision, something that shouldn't be taken lightly. Now, let's talk about, we're talking about some vaccines like, I guess, polio and that sort of thing. Am I wrong?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
But what about other vaccines like the flu shot? That's a vaccine, is it not? And that's not mandatory. It's something that you can choose to get or not get. Are we going to get to a situation where we're going to be forced to get a flu shot because we are endangering the population that we come into contact with?
Well, there are contexts in which all vaccines are necessary, or there are strong programs to reach a level of immunity in the population that's considered to be a safe level. For instance, if you work in healthcare, you have to be immunized against certain things because that's your job. Your job is to protect people from infectious diseases. So there are certain contexts in which they're mandatory, but in general, all vaccines, at least in the United States, have some sort of opt-out provisions, and there are also some individuals who can't take certain vaccines for certain medical reasons. So we'll never reach a point where every single person is required to have every vaccine.
Well, it's again, we don't, we love the fact that we have these medical strides that have been taking place, and we like the protections. Sometimes we don't, it's a balance of, is medicine, imposing on our privacy or our own personal choices, and that's always a fine line. It's always
it really is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I would draw some analogies. You hear a lot where the government is telling us to do something, or it's a conspiracy to take away our freedoms, but I would say it would be similar to traffic signals or speed limits or guardrails on highways. Do they restrict our freedom? Yes, they do, but they're for our own good, and the purpose of it is not to take away our freedom, but to save our life. And so all of these rights are all balanced. There's no one right that's above all the others, and it's always an issue of balancing freedoms.
And it's also, not only saving our own lives, but also saving the lives of others around us, whether it's guardrails or vaccines, it's all appropriate. Dr. Richard Van Ank, Director, Infection Prevention and Epidemiology. Boy, that's a mouthful. I appreciate you coming in this morning, sir.
Thank you, Wayne.